there's so much potential in each one of us if we just have the courage to unravel and stop the stories that are that we tell ourselves that are keeping us from being the best we can be.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Flip That Shit. I am your host, Stacey Uhrig, and today's guest is Terri Mangait. And before we start speaking with Terri, I just want to remind people or introduce people who might be new to the podcast what this cast is all about. So as a trauma recovery coach, I work with a lot of people who are just simply stuck. It's just the most universal, best word I can come up with. And stuck shows up in so many different ways. But what I know to be true is that so often we are stuck in isolation, right? We're coming out of this shadow, if you will, of shame, because a lot of us have been taught and indoctrinated to believe that when life is not smooth and when life is challenging, we should not burden other people with our problems, right? And so when we have problems, we're not sharing in struggle. We are getting into the shadow of shame and kind of retreating from community and retreating from our support systems and dealing with our problems on our own. And that really exacerbates more anxiety, more depression, more stuckness, if you will. But here's what I know. Life is a series of experiences divinely designed for you. And every single one of us has shit. Every single one of us has been through significant challenge because that's what life is about. I'm not saying that life is hard or that life is designed to only be bad. What I'm saying is that life is a series of experiences. Some of them we're going to bump up against and they're going to be really challenging. That's where our lessons are learned. And some of them are going to be beautiful and joyful and amazing. And I see those as our pure respite. Those are our bucket fillers. Those are our window wideners, right? And so what I love about this podcast is it's storytelling. I'm simply looking for people that are willing to be open and share their stories. And most of the people I interview, I've really only met for 10, 15, maybe 30 minutes at another time. And I try to learn about them just enough so I can open up and bring the conversation to you. So let me tell you a little bit about Terri. And my hope is that if Terri's story speaks to you, you'll be able to walk out of this shadow of shame, reach out to Terri, see if there's a connection there, or at least find one person safe that you feel you can share a struggle with. So let me tell you a little bit about Terri and what her story is about. I'm going to hand the mic over to her. Terri Mangait is a certified equine Gestalt coach. She's a Canfield methodology trainer and a transformational speaker. She's an award-winning author of a book called Find True Purpose, Life Beyond the Castle. Her expertise is overcoming the obstacles and unraveling the stories that keep her clients from living their best, most successful life. She's currently writing her next book, Unraveling Your PTS, which she will guide a reader to uncover their own post-traumatic stories. How cool is that? The ones that are keeping them from living their best and most authentic life. By partnering with her herd of wisdom horses at Begin Again Ranch, Terri gets to the root of what's currently holding her clients back from being their most awesome selves and teaches them the tools that they need to strive with confidence into the future of their dreams, the ones that they actually deserve. So what brings Terri to this? Look, none of us get into this stuff without our own story, right? So let me just give you a little synopsis of Terri's story. Not only is Terri a traumatic brain injury survivor, she's also a 29-year sober recovering alcoholic. By writing her award-winning inspirational memoir, Finding True Purpose, she was able to unravel her own post-traumatic story and begin living her most awesome life. So welcome, Terri.
Hey, thank you, Stacey, for having me. This is a great opportunity, and I'm so glad we met. It was just a few weeks ago.
It really was. And I love the fact that we're both coming with our fun, exciting glasses on today. For those that are not seeing us, we both have on the best glasses. So Terri, let's just dive right into it. I love the fact that you have this concept of PTS, right? Post-traumatic story. You have a few of them. Which one would you like to share that you feel called to unravel today here?
For me, the most profound was obviously the traumatic brain injury, and what I went through with that. I was in ICU for 3 weeks, in and out of consciousness. So, I guess you could use the coma word. There were days when my husband got no response from me at all, and other days when I would squeeze his fingers. Mm-hmm. So, he was going through his own trauma. And then I went and spent 4 weeks in a rehabilitation hospital, and then another 4 weeks in a transitional living center. And when I was at the transitional living center, I met with the director of the center and the head neuropsychologist, who pretty much told me that, before my brain injury, my brain function was probably at like a 6 or a 7, which is normal. After my brain injury, my function now is maybe a 2. And after about 2 years of rehabilitation and therapy, I might get back to a 4 or 5. And I went back to my room and kind of tried to digest this. And what it brought up for me was the story, my post-traumatic stories that I've received over the course of my lifetime was always second, never good enough, never worth the time. If you want to belong, you have to buy your way in. And I got back to my room, and instead of, this is the profound moment, instead of accepting what he told me that, okay, now I've got a diagnosis of not being good enough and always broken. Mm-hmm. I called bullshit on him, and I said, that's crap. That's not how I'm going to live the rest of my life. I mean, I was in my early 50s at the time, and I was like, oh, hell no. So instead of, oh, poor pitiful me, and sitting on the couch and eating bonbons and watching reruns of the Big Bang Theory, I moved my family to Colorado and started a business. And the attitude for me was, when something went sideways, and it did. Yeah, I was still in recovery. So when things went sideways, I would sit back a minute and say, well, that was different. How can I approach it to make it come out the way I want to? So I was able to finish my equine Gestalt coaching methodology certification. I also did a live and in-person Jack Canfield training certification, and was proving to myself over the course of those that educational time that my brain is not broken. I just needed to give it time to reweave the neural pathways. And what I found by getting into the round pen and working with my horses, I was so much more intuitive and on point than I was prior to the injury.
So I have a few questions for you.
Sure.
Because I know the answer to this, but my audience does not. So when you moved your family to Colorado, was it to open this equine center?
Yes. Yeah. What I had realized, I had 2 horses in California, and I was at a boarding facility, and I realized that the type of very personal coaching work that I would be doing, I could not offer that at a boarding facility because there are so much other things going on. There were people coming and going. And if I was in the round pen with a horse and a client and someone else wanted to use the round pen, right, I would have to leave because it's not mine. So here I'm on 6 acres. I have 4.5 horses. The half is a mini donkey. And, it's my arena, it's my round pen, and I don't schedule my clients back to back to back.
Right.
Because if you're in the middle of something, either a breakthrough or a breakdown, I don't just, look at my watch like a, talk therapist and say, oh, our time is up. Let's finish this next week.
Yeah.
We go until.
I used to do the same. So the next question, how'd you get that brain injury?
The brain injury was received. I came off one of my horses.
Right.
It was not his fault. I was literally standing still, and someone, it was just at the boarding facility, and someone in the office heard someone outside, fussing with a horse, and she came out. She saw it was me on my horse, and we were just standing there. We weren't doing anything. So she turned to go back in the office and heard me hit the ground. And what she realized later on was that when she looked at me, she could tell there was no one home. And I made no attempt to block my fall. I cracked the left occipital bone. I had a right frontal hematoma. I was airlifted to LACUSD Trauma Center. And what I had started out that day was just to go on a trail ride with my horse. And he kept turning around and going back to the office. So he knew something was going to happen. If I had come off on the trail, who knows when somebody would have found me. So he kept coming back to the office because he knew something was going to happen. And that's how profoundly intuitive and amazing the horses are. They just know.
Well, and I wanted to bring this piece up because I knew how you had gotten your injury, right? And it's never lost on me that for some people, this could result in them never wanting to get onto a horse again.
Right.
And not only did that not result for you, but you took it to another extreme where you wanted to be around horses 24/7, right? You built a life around it. So I have one client that does equine therapy on her own. So I'm somewhat familiar, and I have a few colleagues that are trauma coaches that own equine centers that do equine therapy. But can you explain for the audience, for people who don't understand what it is or why someone would want to do equine therapy, what's the benefit?
The benefit of partnering with the horses is you get such profound aha moments much more quickly than if you're in talk therapy, you kind of have to figure you're going to go, once a week, excuse me, once a week, for a year or whatever. With the horses, I can offer up an example. I was working with a couple, and one of the things I teach with the connection with the Canfield is E plus R equals O. So your event plus your reaction gives you your outcome. If you don't like the outcome, you can't change the event. The event is what it is. You can only change your response to it.
Mm-hmm.
So they came to the ranch, and they had a discussion. I will use that word. It wasn't a fight, but it was a discussion in the car on the way, and they were still at it when they got there. So they sat down in the arena. I had 2 or 3 horses, and the horses, the way I work, the horses are at liberty. So they're no halters, no lead lines. They're not tied up. They're not trained. I can't call them over. And the couple sat across from each other, and he stood up and was loud and was trying to, explain to her or tell her what the issue was. And she sat there and she crossed her legs and she crossed her arms and she kind of hunched over. And while I'm sitting there saying, okay, do I address her reaction or do I address his reaction? In that nanosecond, Bodhi, one of my horses, walks in between them, grabs her by the shoelaces, shakes her foot and drops it, and walks off. He changed her reaction. So I was able to say, what's going on? And she, whenever he gets this way, I always do this. I want to make sure I'm listening intently. So I was like, okay, well, fair enough. I said, but can you look at it from his perspective? And you just closed your shelf off completely. So he's got to get bigger and louder for you to hear him. Mm. And they were both just stunned and this was not unfamiliar to them. So it is a dynamic that happens. So it was, she was able to change her reaction and closed off and listening and responded by sitting there open. Her chest was open. Her, her hands were on the chair arms. He was able to sit down, bring his voice down, and they had a discussion. And it was like the first time that they both felt heard and appreciated.
Tell me how the horse, because this is what I want people to understand, the profoundness of what the horse did. What was the horse responding to? What was the horse tuned into at that moment? And what was the horse trying to tell her?
The horse was telling her, now, I couldn't tell you in my lifetime or prior lifetimes of any time that a horse would come in and grab somebody by the shoelaces. I mean, that in itself is like, wow, what the hell is this? But he was working with me to change her reaction and give her the opportunity to respond to what was going on.
I love that. And so for people that don't know anything about equine therapy, is the idea that the horses are very intuitive and can really read body language or sense.
It's reading the body language. It's also very much your energetic field. They're very in tune to energy, since they are pretty low on the food totem pole. If they were out in the wild, they have to be aware of anything. They have like 3 energy fields, 3 to 4 inches away from them, 6 feet away from them, and then the horizon, because they need to know if there is a mountain lion coming over the horizon. So they're so in tune to all sorts of our energy, absolutely. And I've had horses. As I'm sitting there coaching with someone, I've had horses where, we're in a standard size arena. The horse will come over, turn around, and literally take a shit right where the client is. And it's like, okay, he just shit all over everything you just said. What's going on?
Stop it.
Yeah. And yeah, he could go anywhere in the arena. It's not, this was
and
a reason.
There was a reason.
Typically
be like, okay, well, I'm calling out my own BS.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, okay, so what is not authentic about what you're telling me?
Stop it. And how do they respond to that? Are they a little shocked?
They are shocked. First shocked that, they're being called out by a horse. And second, shocked that I knew it. And some of them, I'm sure you've had this, is they'll kind of put their arms across their chest and put their hand up by their throat. And it's like,
that's me.
I'm fine. I'm telling you everything. It's like, okay, you just closed off your throat chakra and you just shut down your communication. You're in a safe space. The horse knows that you're not telling me everything. So, what is it that we need to unravel? And
I got to ask for another example, because this is just amazing. And then I want to get into your post-trauma story prior to the brain injury where you called bullshit, right? Which I love. I just really want people to get a picture of what it would look like. Like, who might come in for this equine Gestalt coaching, and how would you work on what it is that they're coming in with? Are they riding the horse ever? Or are they just in the space of the horse?
They're in the space of the horse. It's not riding. I don't put you in the saddle. You don't have to learn to ride. You don't have to be, afraid of getting up. There are a few occasions when, if I have someone that's working through a grief process, I may put them on the horse bareback and just have them sit up there so that their root chakra, which is your stability and your foundation, which has been shattered through whatever loss you're dealing with, you are sitting up on top of the horse's heart chakra, which is full of love and reception. And you can just let all of your grief energy slide into the horse. And I tell people, I did this a few years back with a Gold Star mom who obviously she had lost her son in I think it was Afghanistan. And, she was very stoic and, carrying the family. And I said, who's carrying you? And she didn't know how to answer that. So I put her on the horse and she got up there and I said, just let it go. And the horse will carry your grief, you and your grief for you. And she sort of started crying, but she didn't cry much. And I told her, I said, you can take it back when you're done, but just let Smarty carry it for you for just this short period of time. And when she got off the horse, I said, are you okay? And she said, the grief is all I have left of him. If I let it go, I won't have anything.
So profound.
And I was like, that's okay. You can keep it. The horse is just going to carry it for you for a little bit so that you can just take a moment for yourself. But you can have it back anytime you want to. So, the people I deal most with are like women who are repetitive, either relationships that are not working. And, why do I keep attracting the same jerks? And I had one who was in entrepreneurial business, and she was, every time she got close to what she perceived to be success, she would sabotage herself and not do it. So unraveling her story, we found out that I said, and I said, what is your idea of success? And she said, well, my dad was very successful. He had his own business and was always very busy and never had time for the family. And whenever I was around my parents and their friends, I kept hearing his friends saying that he was such a jerk or, he was such an asshole. So while she's telling me this, my donkey is pushing up against her and trying to tip over her chair and pushing up against her. And he was being a real jerk. And I was like, okay, so your story of success that you've been carrying with you is that if you are successful, you have to give up your family and you have to be a real asshole.
I knew you were going to say that. And I love it.
And she just sat back and she was like, oh my God, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. I mean, people don't understand.
That's your father's story. That doesn't have to be your story.
But it's the interpretation we create, and it's the lens through which we see life for certain experiences like success, because we have no other reference point, and we agree to that reference point when we're 8 years old.
Right. Well, exactly. And we get these continuing messages over the course of our lifetime. I got it when you can read my book. I'm an open book, literally. And, I got this message when I was, 8 or 10. I got the message in grammar school. I got the message in high school. I got the message when I was first working. And at that point, it's like, well, yeah, because that's what I heard. I wasn't, and in fact, one of my first bosses, when I started work for him, he was the CEO. I was promoted to his assistant, and he said, okay, so everybody in the office is now going to want to be friends with you, but only because you work for me. And instead of saying, well, what the hell, I'm worth being a friend of, I said to myself, well, of course, that makes sense because, that's the message I've received. So unraveling the story is, you have to first, what I teach and what I do in my speaking presentations is you have to have awareness. Then you have to figure out what your triggers are. And your trigger is a reaction. So once you've got that, let's unravel the story. When did you first get that message? Oh my God, I was 6 and my mother said X, whatever it was. And
so can we use this as a segue?
Yeah.
Can we use this as a segue for you to share the work that you did to figure out and unravel what your true story was?
Yeah, what I went through is when I was writing, I never, I haven't wanted to be a writer all of my life. It was just something that I started doing after the traumatic brain injury and after I came out here and started working with clients and getting more deeply connected to my herd of horses, because instead of at a boarding facility, now they're here and I'm with them, not 24/7. I don't sleep in the barn, but, and what I was able to do is as I was writing the chapters of my story and the title of the book, Finding True to Purpose, Life Beyond the Castle, I went from corporate jets and the top of the castle at the Walt Disney Company to 6 acres and a ranch. So working for Disney had always been my dream job. And I was there for 13 years. And after, the last year, it was like, there's something missing. It just doesn't, I sat at my desk one day and said, they could double my salary and there's still something missing. I'm not fulfilling my purpose. And that's when I got into the equine Gestalt coaching training and partnering with the horses. And after the brain injury, I was finishing up my equine Gestalt coaching certification, and I wasn't volunteering going to go into the horses, and I was called out on it by the facilitator. And she said, we noticed you're not going in. And I said, yeah, I'm fine. I'm good. I'm learning from everyone else and that's okay. And she said, no, we're noticing you're not going in. And I sat there and I hadn't thought about it myself. And it was just like, oh my God, if I don't go in and partner with the horses, I won't find out that I can't anymore because of the brain injury. And when I took that leap and unraveled that story and went in, I found out that it was more profound than anything. I've had colleagues say, how did you know that? Whereas I'm like, how did you not? It was just so profound. So the unraveling of my story came from writing the book. And I'm, not everyone needs to write a book, but I was able to go back to, as I was writing the book, I was seeing, it's like, oh my God, there's that story again. And oh my God, there's that message again. And there it is again. And there it is again. And am I still triggered? Absolutely. But because of my awareness and because I know what the trigger is, I can say, well, here we go again. I'm choosing to respond.
What was the post-traumatic story? The I'm not enough?
Yeah, I'm not enough. And it started when I was, I was probably about 10. We were on vacation. My sister and her girlfriend would go out on the lake in her girlfriend's boat. And the only way I was allowed to go with them is if I bought lunch or a tank of gas for the boat. And then they would let me come. So I had to buy my way in. Mm-hmm. So I always had to buy my way in. And that was the story I was told. I was sitting at a conference a couple of years ago, and, they were doing the hard upsell of, why you needed to, keep doing this. And I'm sitting there saying, well, if I get this many more clients and if I'm going to get my pension and I could kick in my Social Security. And then I sat back because I knew my story. I had been writing the book and it was like, holy shit, I'm doing it again. I'm trying to buy my way into this, hard guru, and it was like, nope, that's it. I gave myself permission to stop buying certifications. And, well, if I just do this, then, my business will be successful and I'll have more clients. And if I just buy this, and on and on and on. So I was able to unravel the story. And
the part of the story that you had to buy acceptance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I had to buy acceptance, and, that was why people, I was part of the Disney family because of who I worked for.
Not because of the quality of work that you did or the person that you are.
That was the story I told myself. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what stories, what other examples do you have of that between that 8-10-year-old and the executive at Disney? Where was it in between? Where else could you see that patterning?
What I could see was that, like when I was in grammar school, and this is not in the book because I just remembered this, a few weeks ago. We had for our grammar school graduation, we had a yearbook, and it was, most likely to and prettiest and best, whatever. And I came in second in 3 categories. And a friend of mine went to the person who came in first in all 3 categories and said, can you just let Terri have one of the categories? And she said no. So, and there was, in grammar school, I mean, you don't have currency to use, so that wasn't going to work. It was, that was an interesting remember, it was like, oh my God, there it is again. High school, I was, part of the student council in sophomore year. They had 2 spots in the sports. I can't remember what the titles were, but there were 2 spots for the director of sports or whatever. And I ran against someone who was on all the sports team, whereas I was not athletic. So I was like the manager of the sports teams. Mm-hmm. So when we got, I lost to her in my freshman year, and I lost to her in my sophomore year, and in the junior year, that's when they had the 2 spots, and I was like, oh, thank God, I can run in the other spot and not run against her. And they wouldn't let me. They said, no, you have to run. You have to run against her. And I just said, no, take this job and shove it. And I quit being manager of the teams, and I walked away, and it was like, no. But, why wasn't I good enough to fill the other spot?
Or just to even, right, exactly.
I mean, I would have had to run against someone anyway, but, right. Just it wasn't someone I've lost to 2 years in a row.
And isn't it interesting? Like, that's not the intention of the person that's doing it, but that is the message that you're receiving, because that's the lens through which you've started accepting agreements about yourself.
Exactly. And we all have these stories, right, that we take with us through our lifetime, that, maybe when you were 6 and you wanted to dress yourself and you were putting, polka dots and stripes or, 2 really strange colors together, and your mom would say, oh my God, Stacy, that looks terrible. I can't believe you're going to try that. You can't dress yourself. Here, let me pick your outfits. And, Mom picked your outfits through high school. The message that you received was that you have no fashion sense and you have no color coordination. Right.
I just was having this conversation with a client the other day about exactly this, about the messaging and the interpretation that young children make right? The inferencing. So, this is the example I use, that one of my kids, and they both did it. So it must have been the older one, because it was the first time I had seen it, came downstairs, of course, in a rush. We're running late for school. And I've asked him to get dressed, and he's at an age where he can go do that. And he comes down with like a pair of shorts on. It's probably like 50 degrees out, maybe colder. And like two different socks, not even the same like type of sock. Like one has like stripes on it, and one's like bright yellow, and one's down at the ankle, and one's up at the knee. And there's two different shoes on, and then like probably a t-shirt and a sweatshirt. And I remember, and I had just read the 4 agreements. And I caught myself, because what I wanted to say was, that's ridiculous. Go upstairs and put on something that matches. Why? Because if he shows up in something that matches, it's going to send a message to people that I'm a good mom because I know how to dress my child. Right. And I caught myself so fast, and I went, well, isn't that a cool outfit that you picked out right there? And you could just see he was like, had pride. And I was like, I love the way that you picked your colors today. Do you like the way you picked your colors? Yeah. Cool. And I just had to like let go of, what are people going to think? And what are they going to think about me? And what are they going to think about my child? Who gives a shit? Right? So when you become in tune with this concept of our children are in an observer role, and really before the age of 8 or 10, they're making inferences on every single thing we say, all the things we don't say, but we give that look, right? And they're looking at it through a lens of, am I enough? Am I being accepted? Do I belong here? We inherently do this because it's so hardwired into us as humans. We're so hardwired for needing acceptance and belonging and having a connection. And any
you didn't belong, you were eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. You needed it's hardwired. This is what we do. And parents don't go into it looking to do bad things for their kids, but you come in and your toddler has just made a complete mess and just all over the place, and you're supposed to be going out somewhere, you're late for school, whatever, and mom comes in and is like, oh my God, you're so stupid, I can't believe you did this, do you know we're leaving, and and on and on and on, and all that child hears is, you're so stupid, you're so stupid, you're so stupid. Instead, walk in and say, oh my God, I'm curious as to why you did this, and especially with teenagers, I'm curious as to why you thought that was a good idea.
Yeah.
No judgment. No, I can't, no, freaking out, you're freaking out inside. That's fine.
Totally.
Help me understand. Help me. This is my issue. Help me understand why you thought this was a good idea. And now we're going to learn how to clean up this mess.
Oh, my favorite, because I have 2 teenagers. My favorite is, well, that was an interesting decision.
Perfect. That
was an interesting decision. Tell me how you came to that conclusion.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
because
help me understand the thought process here. I wouldn't have landed there.
Look, I didn't come into parenting with that kind of parenting style, right? I came into parenting
because we weren't parented that way.
Well, that's kind of the point, right? So what I want people to understand is, listen, up until whatever point you realize it's not working, you did your best. Okay? Because so many people can listen to a podcast like this and say, oh God, damn it. Like, I'm a horrible parent. And what did I do? And how did I do that? Dude, if you knew how many times I cried in the corner with complete guilt on how I parented, honestly, I have fucked up so many times. Here's what I can say. When you know better, you can do better. So the way I parent now is not the same way I parented 2 years ago. It's not the same way I parented 6 years ago. And the way I parent one is not the same I parent the other, right? They both have clearly showed to me they connect with life differently. They move through life differently. They have different needs emotionally, mentally. And as a parent, part of the challenge is the shift and constantly shifting back and forth. If he can, you should be able to bullshit. It's not, and look, my kids are adopted, so I kind of take it through a different lens anyway, because I just don't assume that they're the same. Okay.
Yeah, you're dealing with a whole different layer.
I am dealing with a whole other ball of wax that people don't understand. But that being said, when we find ourselves parenting in a certain way and we're not getting the result that we want, you have a couple of choices. One is you can bang your head against the wall. And the second is you can look back a little bit and say, well, where did I learn this? Why is this important to me? Why am I parenting this way?
Unravel your story.
Unravel the story. Often we're looking back at our parents. How were we parented? How were they parented? How were your great grandparents parented? And if it's not been encouraged to be individual or be creative or to think for yourself and make your own rules and make your own environment, and you're going to be ridiculed, why are you doing it that way? We've always done it this way. You have the ability to break that generational cycle of even parenting.
Right. Yeah. Change your automatic reaction into a response.
Yeah. We're not robots.
Yeah.
We need to individualize how we are nurturing and responding to our children.
Exactly.
And when we try to do this one fits all scenario, you're going to bang your head against the wall. The problem is it's a lot of work to individualize your parenting.
Yes.
Parenting is fucking hard work.
Oh, it is. It is. Totally.
Right? So we have to get into the trenches and we have to say, well, how do I best meet my kids' needs? That's our job. That's our job.
And it's so complicated now with all of the social media and the tech stuff. And it's just,
it's other level. Parenting today is other level. And sometimes I do cringe when my mom's like, well, when your brother was in high school, I'm like, okay, it was 20 years ago. Like it's light years away. Like you're not talking about apples to oranges. You're talking about apples to Lamborghinis. Like they're not even in the same category because we're not working in the same environment anymore.
Exactly.
They don't even remotely look the same.
Exactly. So I mean,
so you learn these things about yourself, how you navigated life. You had to buy into, nobody was going to want to be with you or connect with you unless ... you could buy yourself in, or you were connected to the right person, because I myself am not enough. Right. Now you're hearing from these top neurosurgeons and doctors. Listen, here's another agreement I want you to accept about yourself. You're never going to go beyond 2. What was it in you when you went back to that room and said, bullshit? What had flipped in you? What had changed?
What I think, that's a really good question. I've never given it much thought. What flipped it for me was I had left the corporate world. I was starting out on my own, and if I continued to accept that message, then I never would be good enough, and I never would succeed, and I would be a lump on a couch because I can't think. But because of some of my I did energetic, Reiki and energetic training, and I was a massage therapist. And I knew there was so much partnering with the horses, the connection there, and there was so much of our brain that we do not use, that it was just like, no, I just need to give it time to reweave the neural pathways. And, would it be the same as I was? No. I mean, there's some, I am what, 10 years post-traumatic brain injury now. So, but early on, it was like, I couldn't multitask. It was just do one thing at a time. I'm much better now, but there's so much potential in each one of us if we just have the courage to unravel and stop the stories that we tell ourselves that are keeping us from being the best we can be.
100%. This was a traumatic event, right? This injury, falling off of the horse, and all of the things that came with that injury. I often say that life is a series of challenges, or life is a series of experiences that are divinely designed for us, and that there is a gift in every challenge and purpose in all pain.
Oh, absolutely.
If I were to say that to you about this event, where are the gifts? What is the purpose of having that experience?
The purpose, what I've taken from that is, because I'm using a different part of my brain, I am much more connected to the messages from spirit. I get downloads when I'm in with clients. I am much more connected to the energy and just the wisdom of the horses. And because of that, I am able to work with my clients either here on the ranch or, virtually. I can do this virtually also, to help them understand what the story is, they may not think of something as a trauma, but if you're 16 and you get a bad haircut, that's a trauma. And how many of your girlfriends told you, what the fuck were you thinking? Can I say that? Sorry.
Oh gosh, have you seen the title of my podcast?
Okay.
You're good to go.
Okay. So, it depends on what the trauma is. And, the bad haircut at 16 is a trigger from something that happened to you when you were 4. So
Amen.
that's because I've been able to unravel and reweave my own version of living the most amazing life. I am an expert in helping you do that too.
I love it. And do you feel like without the injury, you would have not been as connected and as intuitive in the way that you are?
I do think, I don't think I would be as, and I wouldn't have the ability, and I wouldn't have gone into the, unraveling of the stories, expertise, because I was able to unravel my own. I would not have been as, animal communication, intuitiveness, and the connection to my own spirit guides, and who I talk to more than once on a daily basis.
I love it. This has been amazing. Thank you so much for introducing the audience to equine therapy. I was really excited to have you on because we talk a lot about trauma, but we don't always talk about solutions. So I think it's such a great solution.
And talk therapy is good for some people. That's fine. But if you want to come out in nature and connect with the horses, it's
absolutely. So let me let people know how they can find Terri. So all of this will be in the show notes, but Terri's website is Begin Again Ranch. It's in Colorado. And if you do sign up for a coaching package with Terri, all you have to do is mention this podcast and you'll get $50 off that coaching package. And if you want to follow her on social media, on Facebook, it's just her name. Again, it'll be in the show notes, but it's Terri, Terri, Mongait, Mongait. And her Instagram is Begin Again Ranch. So this has been amazing. I really, really appreciate your time sharing with us a little bit of insight on some other therapeutic models, some other coaching methodologies, such as Canfield and of course the equine, and of course just for sharing your story. I think anybody that's had traumatic brain injuries, and we've dealt with it here actually in our own home, people don't understand all of the after effects that can have on someone.
Right.
It's a pretty intense experience for everybody involved, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Not only the survivor, but the caregivers too, because, they don't understand that, your son is not processing what
Right.
you need him to do. And his frustration is because he can't process. So I have a couple of exercises that I do with caregivers that kind of show them how challenging it can be.
Yeah.
When you lose your sense of processing, and you don't take the time you need to, just let him. He doesn't want you to do it for him. Just let him think it through.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you so much. This has been amazing. Again, it's Terri Mangait. And if you enjoyed this episode, you can catch all of our episodes. All you have to do is search Flip That Shit or find me by name, Stacey Uhrig, STACEYUHRIG. Make sure when you go, you subscribe and you tune in. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.